Throughout history, the Pharisees have been painted as the ultimate bad guys in religious narratives, particularly in the New Testament. Labeling someone Pharisaic implies that they are hypocritical, placing a pious mask over selfish intentions. This reputation often overshadows any good they did, casting them in roles of hypocritical teachers and harsh legalists. But was this portrayal an accurate reflection of their true character? Beneath the surface lies a complex history of a group dedicated to communal law, purity, and the survival of Jewish religious identity. One telling anecdote about the Pharisees' reputation comes from Germany, where ordering a Pharisaire in a coffee shop will yield a strong coffee sweetened with whipped cream, a delicious disguise for the heavy dose of rum beneath. This drink earned its name after northern German islanders created it to hide alcohol consumption from a pastor who was vehemently against it. Once the pastor sipped the wrong cup, he declared, "You Pharisees." The name stuck, as did the Pharisees' reputation for outward appearances that allegedly concealed ulterior motives. Yet, like the rum in the Pharisaic coffee, there was more hidden beneath the Pharisees' outer image. Despite their harsh portrayal, particularly in the New Testament and by historians like Josephus, the Pharisees were more than just caricatures of hypocrisy. They were one of several Jewish sects during the Second Temple period and arguably the most connected to the people. While the Sadducees aligned with aristocratic temple authorities and the Zealots pushed for political rebellion, the Pharisees saw themselves as champions of the common people. They believed in bringing the law closer to everyday life and sought to make religious observance accessible and meaningful for all, not just the elite. The term Pharisee itself means separated one, a reflection of their desire for purity and a commitment to upholding Jewish law. Yet their strict adherence wasn't solely about religious rigidity. Instead, they practiced a halakhic praxis, interpreting Jewish law in ways that made it practical and accessible to everyone, from farmers to tradesmen. Their contributions went beyond religious instruction. Pharisees often took on roles as teachers, community leaders, and judges, embedding moral integrity within the social structure of the Jewish community. This connection to the common people, however, also put the Pharisees at odds with other Jewish groups and later with early Christian teachings. In the New Testament, they are frequently criticized by Jesus for focusing more on ritual purity than genuine compassion. In Matthew chapter 23, verses 13 through 39, Jesus depicts them as blind 5 times and whitewashed tombs, supposedly pure on the outside but corrupt within. Jesus highlights the hypocrisy he perceived, accusing them of imposing burdensome laws on others while refusing to ease the people's load. The Pharisees often come across in the New Testament as a rigid, unified group fixated on rules and rituals. While all Pharisees were indeed concerned with purity, they were anything but monolithic. Fierce debates raged among them about how purity should be achieved. Some Pharisees believed that purity worked from the outside in. For them, ritual baths, or mikvahs, and the meticulous cleansing of cups and utensils were the keys to maintaining holiness. It's this mindset that Jesus critiques in Matthew chapter 23, where he rebukes those who clean the outside of cups and dishes while neglecting the greed and self-indulgence within. Interestingly, not all Pharisees opposed Jesus. In fact, some would have agreed with him that true purification begins with the heart and faith in God. A closer reading of the New Testament reveals Pharisees who supported or even followed Jesus. Take Nicodemus, for example. A Pharisee himself, he sought out Jesus under the cover of night to ask questions and later brought spices and money for Jesus' burial. Then there's the unnamed Pharisee in Luke chapter 13, verse 31, who warns Jesus about Herod's plans to kill him. And perhaps most strikingly, the book of Acts mentions a group of Pharisees who joined the early Christian movement, standing firm in their faith even after Jesus' death. Yet these Pharisees didn't always align with apostles like Paul and Peter. Their ideological differences may have contributed to the negative portrayal of Pharisees as a whole in the New Testament. History's harsh view of the Pharisees owes more to theological and political divides than to who they actually were. Far from being a single-minded faction, The Pharisees were a diverse and dynamic group grappling with questions of faith, tradition, and how best to live a holy life. But it's essential to recognize that these criticisms targeted certain behaviors rather than the Pharisaic movement as a whole. Many scholars believe that the Gospel writers, addressing audiences familiar with the Pharisees, used them symbolically to critique religious hypocrisy and highlight the differences between early Christian values and traditional Jewish practices. This rhetorical choice would later solidify the Pharisees' image as religious villains. Interestingly, despite the harsh criticisms, the Pharisees' influence on Judaism was transformative and lasting. While often painted as legalistic oppressors, their practices demonstrate a genuine intent to help others lead a holy life. Take, for instance, their approach to ritual purity. According to Leviticus 11:33, any clay vessel contaminated by unclean substances had to be destroyed. This stringent rule would be costly and difficult to uphold, particularly for common people without access to unlimited resources. The Pharisees addressed this problem with a practical solution. Only the inside of the vessel needed to remain pure. This adjustment meant people could handle vessels without constantly fearing contamination, making adherence to purity laws far more feasible. They also popularized stone vessels considered impervious to impurity. These adjustments reflected the Pharisees' larger vision, making religious observance achievable for all. The Pharisees' lasting impact is visible even in the archaeological record. From the 1st century BCE, stone vessels began to appear throughout Israel, a period coinciding with the Pharisees' rise to influence. Archaeologists connect this phenomenon with Pharisaic teachings on purity, as stone vessels were thought not to transmit impurity. The surge in ritual baths, synagogues, and religious artifacts from this era further illustrates their efforts to foster a spiritually engaged community. Following the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE, the Pharisees, who had previously been marginalized, rose as the leading voice in Jewish religious life. The Pharisaic tradition eventually evolved into Rabbinic Judaism, laying the groundwork for modern Jewish practice. While New Testament polemics left an indelible mark on the Pharisees' reputation, the true legacy of their teachings and influence paints a more complex picture. Their emphasis on charity, ethical behavior, and communal integrity continues to inspire Jewish thought and practice today. The Pharisees were not merely the bad guys of religious narratives. They were a diverse and influential group committed to upholding the Torah and nurturing community welfare. The caricature of hypocrisy, although resonant in certain historical texts, obscures their broader contributions to Jewish life. Reassessing their story allows for a fuller understanding of the Pharisees' role in history and the valuable lessons they imparted to generations that followed. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this video. Show your support for our community by liking and subscribing. Stay curious and see you in the next one.